Hello and welcome to Replay Retro. I'm Matt, and on this week's show we bid a farewell to Sega as a hardware company by taking a look at the ill-fated Dreamcast. In 1997, Sega was a long way from the success of the Nintendo-smashing Mega Drive. They had attempted to keep this system alive with expensive add-ons such as the Mega CD and the 32X, with neither system really catching on, and both quickly losing the support of Sega, much to the frustration of gamers and games developers. Eventually, the Mega Drive was retired and replaced by the Sega Saturn, but once again Sega failed to stick by their hardware and quickly announced that they were working on another new platform. This ruined sales of the Saturn, as gamers didn't see the point in buying it if it would soon be obsolete. Infuriated by Sega's total lack of commitment, many developers turned on the company, with Electronic Arts even going as far as to say they would never work with Sega again. Thus, whatever new system they made, it would never see an EA game. This was a massive blow to Sega's new project, even before it went to production, as it meant the majorly successful EA Sports titles, including the FIFA and Madden series, wouldn't be released on their console, limiting the audience from the start. Sega knew they needed to make a fresh start with a system that nobody could ignore, and set up two completely independent teams to design their 6th generation hardware, aiming for a release long before the competition. The first of these teams was headed by outsider Tatsuo Yamamoto, while the second was led by Sega legend Hideki Sato. Initially, it was Yamamoto's design which Sega chose to run with, featuring a 3DFX graphics chip. However, when the 3DFX company made details of the contract and existence of the new console public, Sega were outraged and immediately switched to the Power VR chip of Sato's design. Project Katana was now underway, with Sega pinning all their hopes on using the latest technology to demolish the competition. Eventually renamed Dreamcast, the system would feature a number of technological firsts, which would change the minds of its doubters. It would be the first 128-bit console, the first with a built-in modem for internet access, allowing online multiplayer and web browsing backed up by the all-new internet service provider SegaNet. It would also be the first console to support the Windows operating system, as well as the first system to allow direct link-up with a handheld in the form of the Neo Geo Pocket Color. The console also featured its own advanced CD format called the GD-ROM, which could hold 1 GB of data, as well as an advanced memory card called the VMU, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. One important omission from the specification, however, is the lack of DVD playback. The DVD format was just coming into popularity, and this mistake would come back to haunt Sega when competition came. Brilliantly scheduled for release 18 months before the PlayStation 2, the Dreamcast hit US shelves on the 9th of the 9th, 1999, and sold almost 250,000 units within the first 24 hours, with Sega struggling to meet demand for the first 3 weeks of sales. A month later, the system launched in the UK for just under £200, and once again, supply could not meet demand. Things looked good for Sega, as the Dreamcast quickly took over the market with a fantastic array of launch titles including Sonic Adventure and Ready to Rumble, which were quickly backed up by brilliant arcade conversions such as House of the Dead 2 and Crazy Taxi. However, EA stayed true to their word and left the console without their smash hit sports titles. So, to combat this, Sega launched the 2K Sports series and did a fantastic job creating equally as impressive and sometimes better sports titles for the Dreamcast, even launching a special edition of the console packed in with two 2K Sports games. Sadly though, this success was about to become short-lived, but before we take a look at why, let's have a look at the system itself and a few of those games. And here we are with the actual PAL Dreamcast system itself. You can tell that this is the PAL system because of the blue swirl logo on the case there. In North America and Japan it was an orange swirl, and for PAL it was changed to blue purely because of copyright issues with another company who already had an orange swirl as their logo. On the top of the system then here, you can see the massive drive cover here, which is opened via the open button here. When that pops up, you can see the GD-ROM drive there. Closing that again, you can see the power LED on the front. Even on the PAL version, this still lights up orange. They didn't change the LED to match the logo. You also then have the power button itself here. Then on the front of the console, you obviously have the Sega logo there and 4 controller ports. Sega obviously saw what Nintendo had done with the N64 and realised that 4 controller ports was definitely the way forward, so they went with that. Interesting that Sony decided to stick to having just 2 controller ports and require gamers to buy a multi-tap if they wanted to have 4 players on the same system, whereas Sega and Nintendo here were saying that you wouldn't need multi-taps, no point having a multi-tap, just have 4 ports straight on the front of the console. That's good from them there, it's saving the user a little bit of money. You also here have the Windows CE logo to say that the Dreamcast is Windows CE compatible. Although an important note is that the console doesn't have Windows CE built directly into it. The operating system was actually game dependent, so each game could have its own operating system on the disc, which would be booted to the console when you put that disc in. This was to make it easier to update the system and make sure that games would always be running on the latest operating system, which is a really good idea really on behalf of Sega, as it meant that developers weren't limited to making a game that was compatible with Windows CE. So that is a really good idea. Many games do use the Windows CE operating system, but they don't have to. That's the key point there. Around the side then here, you have a vent, and this is where the modem lives. Straight out of the box, the Dreamcast comes with this 56K dial-up modem for going online to browse the net or play against your friends, which was obviously the first console to include this right out of the box. You could, if you wanted to, upgrade that to a broadband adapter, which simply plugs in where that one is. Then around the back here, you have the AV port for connecting to your television, the serial port, which was used for a limited number of accessories, including the Neo Geo Pocket Color link cable, which would connect in there and then to the Neo Geo itself. And of course here you have the power cable socket, which is just a standard kettle plug, so if you do lose that, very easy to replace. And on the other side here, nothing at all. And as you'd expect, on the bottom you have a variety of different warnings and labels. There's actually quite a lot on the bottom of the Dreamcast compared to some systems. But there you go, there they all are. Over here then we have the controller itself, which is quite a large controller, but fits very comfortably into your hands compared to a lot of controllers, especially the N64 controller, which I've always struggled to find a comfortable position to hold. You have your 4 standard buttons there, as well as a start button, the usual D-pad, and of course a nice analog stick there for your 360-degree movement. As remember, we were now fully in the 3D world, so the Dreamcast needed to be capable of supporting that. On the back, you also had analog triggers, which are great for your acceleration and deceleration in games, rather than being fully on or fully off. These have a nice range of movement through them. The cable actually comes out of the front of the controller and then heads around the back via this little clip here. This is because this backspace was designed for having additional modules attached, such as a rumble pack or memory expansion, or of course the visual memory unit. Now the visual memory unit is like a normal, say, Sony memory card, but obviously has these controls and this screen. What these are for is so that on the go you can take aspects of a game with you and work on that game while you're not with the Dreamcast. For example, Sonic Adventure. Sonic has little buddies in that game called Chiao Pets, much like Tamagotchis, and they could be installed to the VMU. You could then take the VMU with you wherever you were going, and you could help upgrade your character on there, then re-import them back to Sonic Adventure the game, and you've got a much stronger character than you would have had previously, which is a great idea. You can also make them battle by linking two VMUs together if you have a friend that also has a VMU and that same kind of game. And another great function of the VMU is in the way it displays data. When it's slotted into the controller like this, the screen is still visible. So the game can give you a certain amount of information through that screen. So for example, in Resident Evil you have a heartbeat monitor on there, which obviously, you know, gives you an indication of the health of your character that you're playing without it having to be on the screen. Other things this screen can be used for is picking certain options in a game without other people that you're playing against in the same room knowing what options you're picking. So for example, in sports games you could pick your plays and formations on this screen without your opponent being able to see on the main screen what you were picking. And obviously, if they can't see what you're picking, they can't use that to influence their own decision. So that's a really great feature in that there really is an element of mystery. They don't know what you're picking, you don't know what they're picking. It's much more realistic, especially for sports games. The games themselves come in these cases, unless of course you're in North America. These are much flimsier than dual cases, and you'll often find them with either broken hinges because the hinges are quite thin, or because of how thick they are, but how little there is actually in there, so there's little supporting this, you'll often find them with great big cracks across here or across here. They really don't survive very well. They're not the most well thought out cases that Sega have ever come up with. In the front section here, you'll find the disc, which looks like a standard CD-ROM, but is obviously, as we discussed earlier, the GD-ROM 1GB format that the Dreamcast used. And then in the back here is where you would find your manuals, registration cards, and all the usual stuff that you expect to find in a game. So, let's now take a look at some of the games for the PAL Dreamcast. Okay, so the first thing you're going to notice is that I'm filming the TV screen rather than directly capturing the footage from the Dreamcast via my capture card. And that's purely because the way the Dreamcast works means it won't actually output to a capture card, which is pretty weird really. All other consoles I can convert from SCART to a composite format that the capture card will recognise, but not the Dreamcast. I've actually just wasted a lot of money on cables to make it work, and it hasn't. So the first game we're going to look at here is Crazy Taxi. Everyone should be fairly familiar with Crazy Taxi. Take various passengers to their destinations, earning money and racking up more time to stay in the game for longer. You earn more money by dodging traffic, or jumping, or other such things. You don't earn money, however, for wasting time like that. The faster you get the person to their destination, the more money you'll earn. I nearly killed her, but I didn't kill her. That's the point. The different coloured symbols above the customers' heads indicates how difficult that journey should be. You see here we're taking this customer to Pizza Hut. There are a number of companies who basically use the game to advertise, from Pizza Hut to Levi's to Tower Records. Okay, so the next game we're going to look at here is the fighter Power Stone. It's a really cool, unique fighter in a fully 3D environment. I'm actually going to be fighting myself here, Rouge versus Rouge. Doesn't really show off the game very well. Basically you can pick up and throw various things in the arena, or you can use weapons that you find in the arena, as well as your usual jumps, punches and kicks that you would expect in any other fighter.
Are you ready? Action!
But your aim is to pick up the 3 power stones which will appear around the arena at set times and allow you to level up your character to a level where they become much more powerful. Which I've just done, so I've now got a much more powerful character. And then the stones are released for people to try and collect again. Every time you are hit in a big way, like I was then, you lose one of the stones that you'd picked up. There you go, so I've just released some stones from her. And I'm powerful again. There we go, so that's her defeated. Power Stone is a game I would definitely recommend you pick up if you have a Dreamcast and you don't already have it. There is also Power Stone 2, so you could pick that up instead. Okay, so the game you're looking at now is the well-known Quake 3 Arena. Obviously the Quake series itself is very well known. This was the first time gamers had seen a console FPS where they could play online against their friends, or of course just random people that they would meet in the lobbies for these games, making it a very impressive leap forward. Obviously the PC had had this kind of technology before. That was silly. Yeah, obviously the PC had had this technology before, but it was completely new for a console to provide this online experience. I'm obviously not playing online right now. I'm just using the AI and sucking very badly. Unless you plan on using the online capabilities of the system, this game is probably not one you need to bother picking up. But it does support 4 players on the same console in split screen, so you could always do that. Services such as Xlink Kai, I believe, support online gaming for Xbox, Dreamcast and GameCube, so they're worth looking into. While sales of the Dreamcast and its games were good, Sega knew how many consoles they needed to get into homes for it to be a sustainable business, and while they were on track to achieve this target, one obstacle stood in their way. A large black slab loomed on the horizon. The eagerly anticipated PlayStation 2 was on its way, and with a release date announced along with DVD playback capability, sales of the Dreamcast plummeted. The enormous success of the original PlayStation had earned Sony such a following that just the theoretical existence of a new console was enough to make gamers willing to wait and save their money. Sega panicked, and the price of the Dreamcast went into a desperate freefall, with American gamers even being offered free consoles if they signed up to the SegaNet ISP. But not even this desperation could revitalise sales, and the launch of the PS2 for the Christmas 2000 season pushed the Dreamcast into second place. All was not lost though, as Sega were thrown one last lifeline. Sony had failed to produce anywhere near the number of consoles they had planned, and they were quickly sold out everywhere, with a 3-month delay expected before supply could stabilise. Realising that thousands of gamers would be waking up on Christmas Day morning without a PS2 under the tree, Sega made a big push to sell Dreamcasts. After all, surely it's better to wake up with a Dreamcast under the tree than no console at all, right? Wrong. People actually decided to wait for the PS2, and Sega's Christmas miracle never came. By the end of January, the company announced that it was pulling the plug, and the Dreamcast was officially dead just 2 months later, leaving only a handful of developers still releasing titles. It all just goes to show what brand loyalty can do. Sega had lost theirs by ripping off the fans with their lack of commitment in the years before, leaving them utterly defenceless against Sony and their loyal gamers, despite powerful hardware, great games and revolutionary features. Normally, consoles fail because of poor hardware or poor games, making the Dreamcast an unusual case. Sega was now out of the hardware market, and has stuck to this statement ever since. And there's something very sad about playing Sonic games on a Nintendo console, but these days that blue logo now appears on the boxes for all the major platforms, as the company continues to develop games with varying success. Today, the Dreamcast is very fondly remembered, and the homebrew community is thriving thanks to the console's willingness to play burned CDR discs. Even today, a whole 12 years after its release, games are still being made, and the graphics on the system are impressive. It's also safe to say that it paved the way for things we now take for granted, such as Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network. With that in mind, it's definitely a system that's worth picking up, because it's not rare, and that means it's not expensive either, with very few titles commanding the higher price tags. That's all we've got time for on this week's show, but join me again next week on Replay Retro for more retro gaming reviews.